The night they signed the $560,000 check for my sister's house, my mother told me I should learn to accept failure. I just nodded, pocketing the empty envelope she handed me, along with a red-stamped property deed. They'd bought their dream home on the only road that cut across the useless parcel of land I was given at 18. I didn't argue. I just kept the land, and I waited for the right moment at the office. My name is Rhea Collier. I am 32 years old, and I am the redevelopment manager for Gray Line Holdings, which happens to be the largest commercial real estate firm in Everland County. And on this particular Tuesday, I was watching my life get appraised and devalued over a plate of pan-seared scallops at the Stonebrook Grill in Norfield. The restaurant was my parents' idea of understated luxury: dark wood, recessed lighting, the low hum of conversations that never quite broke into laughter. It was a place for celebrating quiet victories and cementing family legacies, and tonight, the legacy was not mine. My father, Richard Collier, cleared his throat, tapping his water glass with a sterling silver fork. The gentle ting silenced the table. He had the kind of easy, confident smile that made bank loan officers approve things on the spot. "Well," he began, his eyes fixed on my younger sister, Everly, "your mother and I have been thinking, it's time you had a real start, a proper foundation." My mother, Eleanor, reached across the table and placed her hand over Everly's. Her manicure was immaculate, the pale pink nails gleaming like seashells. "We're so proud of the woman you've become, darling." Everly, perpetually sunny at 27, beamed. "What is it?" My father leaned back, the picture of magnanimity. "We're giving you a gift to help you and Tate buy that house you love in West Hollow, $560,000. The number hung in the air, as solid and heavy as the oak table we were sitting at. It was an anchor, a beginning, a clear demarcation. Everly gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes, the pretty, photogenic kind. "Oh my God, Mom, Dad, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," my mother said, her voice soft. "Just be happy." While they basked in the glow of their own generosity, I took a slow, deliberate sip of my water. I felt nothing, not jealousy, not anger. It was the cold, clean calm of a hypothesis being proven correct. I had anticipated this, planned for variables, and run the emotional calculus 1,000 times. The result was always the same. My mother's gaze finally shifted to me. Her smile tightened, losing its warmth. She slid a thin white envelope across the tablecloth. It stopped just short of my bread plate. It was empty. I already knew it was empty. It was a prop in this little play. "And for you, Rhea," she said, her voice losing its gentle cadence and taking on the hard edge of a final verdict. "This is a lesson. You're not cut out for big things. You never were. It's time you learn to accept failure." The words didn't sting. They clicked into place, a final puzzle piece I didn't know I was waiting for. Failure. It wasn't an insult. It was my official designation within the Collier family ecosystem. I was the control group, the cautionary tale. I picked up the empty envelope, its crisp paper a stark contrast to the thick checkbook my father had just tucked back into his jacket. "Thank you, Mom," I said, my voice even. Everly, oblivious, was already swiping through her phone. "Look, this is it." She turned the screen towards me. The house was a classic American dream. A 2-story white clapboard with black shutters and a wide, welcoming porch. But my eyes weren't on the house. They were on the approach. A long gravel driveway, idyllic and serene, cut through a dense stand of silver birch trees, creating a perfect private corridor from the main road. It was beautiful. It was also a fatal flaw. "It's lovely, Ev," I said, and I meant it. The architecture was sound. I raised my water glass. "To your new beginning." They all raised their glasses, my father's beaming smile returning, my mother's expression softening as she looked back at her favored daughter. As they clinked their crystal, a number repeated in my head like a mantra. 17B, plat map, 04 Tukai 1117 B. Everlyn County Registry of Deeds, a long, awkward strip of land officially designated a flag lot, a remnant from a poorly subdivided farm a century ago. It was considered worthless, landlocked, and forgotten. It was the narrow strip the birches grew on. It was the land that beautiful, flawed driveway crossed. It was my land. My phone buzzed against the table, a low, insistent vibration. I glanced down. The family group chat. Collier clan was exploding. Aunt Carol, so thrilled for you. Everly, you deserve it all, Everly. My cousin, Mark, congrats, Ev. Don't worry, Rhea. You're a failure with a title. That's something. He'd added a winking emoji. I ignored them. My thumb moved with practiced efficiency, closing the messaging app and opening the Everlyn County GIS portal. The satellite map loaded, a patchwork of green and gray. I typed in the parcel ID. The screen refreshed, highlighting two adjacent lots. One was the large, neat rectangle of the West Hollow property, the future home of Everly and Tate. The other was a thin, almost invisible line running from the road and then blossoming into a small, useless square behind it, Lot 17B. My finger zoomed in on the property data. Owner, Rhea E. Collier, assessed value, $4,100. Annual taxes, $88. I swiped down, status, taxes paid in full for the current fiscal year. I scrolled to the bottom of the record, to a digital note I had uploaded myself years ago, a scanned document from the town clerk's office. It was a simple annotation, meaningless to anyone else. Row recorded 2009-341A. Right-of-way, the legal right, established by usage or grant, to pass along a specific route through grounds or property belonging to another. The document, 2009-341A, was a dusty piece of paper I'd uncovered during a college internship at the town planning office. It granted the owner of the main lot temporary, conditional access across 17B. It was a gentleman's agreement, not an ironclad easement, meant for farm equipment in a bygone era. It was never intended for a residential driveway, and no title search for a multi-million-dollar property would ever dig deep enough to find a flimsy, 70-year-old right-of-way agreement for an adjacent parcel assessed at less than the price of a used car. They wouldn't look. They saw a driveway and assumed it belonged to the house. They didn't know the only legal way to drive a car to their dream home was through my failure. I looked up from my phone. Tate, Everly's fiancé, was talking about mortgage rates. My father was nodding sagely, offering advice. My mother was discussing paint colors with Everly, dove white for the kitchen, slate blue for the master bedroom. They were building a life on a foundation of assumptions. I didn't want their $560,000. Money was simple, transactional. It could be earned, spent, lost. What I wanted was something they understood far better, yet never credited me with possessing. I wanted leverage. I wanted the kind of power that comes not from a checkbook, but from a line on a map, a clause in a forgotten document. I wanted to own the ground beneath their feet. I folded the empty envelope and tucked it into my purse, right next to the worn leather wallet that held my driver's license and my corporate credit card. A failure with a title. I let the rest of the dinner wash over me, the sounds of their happiness a dull roar in the background. I ate my scallops, I smiled when spoken to, and I recorded everything. Every smug glance from my father, every dismissive wave of my mother's hand, every triumphant little laugh from my sister. I filed it all away in a cold, quiet place in my mind, the same place I kept plat maps and zoning codes. This wasn't an ending. It was a site survey, and the development was about to begin. The Collier family operates on paperwork. We are a portfolio of achievements, a collection of assets designed to look good on a balance sheet. Our entire lives were curated for presentation. We were the family whose Christmas cards were professionally photographed in coordinating shades of beige and cream, sent out the day after Thanksgiving. We were the family whose mortgage applications were pre-approved in under an hour, whose credit scores were pristine, whose investment portfolios were aggressively moderate. My role in this portfolio was the academic. I produced the honor roll certificates, the debate trophies, the acceptance letter to a respectable state university, but that's where my curated path diverged from the prospectus. While I produced the paper, I was expected to finance it myself. I paid my tuition by working, not a glamorous barista job, but a grueling, fluorescent-lit internship at the Norfield Town Planning and Zoning Department. I spent my summers in a basement office surrounded by rolling shelves of blueprints and topographical maps, learning the arcane language of setbacks, variances, and conditional use permits. I was the one who pulled the dusty, leather-bound registry books and cross-referenced deeds from 1950. Everly, meanwhile, was an experience. She was the asset you couldn't quantify but loved to talk about at cocktail parties. When she graduated high school, with a perfectly respectable, if uninspired, GPA. My parents funded a gap year for her to find herself. Her journey of self-discovery conveniently routed through a series of 4-star resorts in Bali, Tuscany, and Costa Rica. She sent back sun-drenched photos of herself doing yoga on beaches and holding glasses of wine in sun-dappled vineyards, captioned with inspirational quotes she'd found online. "We have to invest in the one with more potential for returns," my father explained to me once, his tone reasonable, as if discussing two different stocks. "Everly has the personality, the charm. She connects with people. That's a high-growth asset. You're more of a utility bond. Ria, steady, reliable, but low yield." My mother, whose personal mantra was, "Family is an asset," framed it differently. She collected inspirational slogans from home decor stores and treated them as gospel. Her favorite, framed in distressed white wood in our kitchen, read, "It's not what you have, it's who you have." But what it really meant was what you had, and who could get you more of it. I didn't fit the aesthetic. I was the filing cabinet in her otherwise perfectly staged living room. The divergence was codified the year I turned 18. My maternal grandparents passed away, leaving behind a modest estate. They had always been simpler, quieter people who saw the world in tangible things, not in balance sheets, in their will. They specified 2 bequests, intended to be perfectly equal, for Everly, a trust fund containing $50,000 in cash, for me, a piece of land, parcel 17B, Norfield Township. My parents were ecstatic for Everly. "A wonderful start," my father proclaimed. "Seed money for her future." They looked at my inheritance with undisguised pity. Lot 17B was the runt of a 1970s subdivision, a long, narrow strip of land that ran from the main road before hooking into a small, landlocked square behind the prime lots. It was the geographic equivalent of a manufacturing defect. It was inaccessible, overgrown with weeds and scrub oak, and too narrow to build on. It was a flag lot. A term of art I learned meant it was mostly pole. "Well, it's fair," my mother said, forcing a comforting smile. "50,000 in cash, 50,000 in land value. It's the same." The assessor's office disagreed, valuing the land at a fraction of that. But my parents held to the narrative. Everly got the liquid asset. I got the patch of poison ivy. They called it Ria's weeds for years. I never corrected them. I just paid the minuscule property tax bill every year, first with my internship money, then with my salary. That internship in the planning office became my education. While Everly was learning about artisan cheeses in Italy, I was learning about riparian rights and non-conforming use. I learned that the driest, most boring lines of text, covenants, restrictions, and easements, were where the real power lay. Land wasn't just dirt. It was a bundle of rights, and rights could be unbundled, sold, leased, or withheld. When I graduated, I was the only applicant at Grayline Holdings who could read a 70-year-old plat map and immediately identify 3 zoning violations and a potential access conflict. They hired me in the redevelopment division, the department that specialized in turning forgotten, useless properties like 17B into profitable commercial centers. I spent my days drawing traffic flow models for shopping plazas, analyzing sightlines for drive-thrus, and negotiating easements with recalcitrant property owners. I became an expert in the precise, unyielding language of state easement law. I remember bringing it up once, and only once. I was 25, home for Thanksgiving. My father was complaining about a zoning battle for an office park he was trying to finance. "You know," I said casually, "that flag lot of mine, 17B? It actually bisects the access route for the West Hollow Estates. If someone ever wanted to seriously develop that backland, they'd have to negotiate an easement." My father chuckled, not unkindly. "Rhea, honey, that's just lines on a map. Nobody's going to pay for a shortcut through a thistle patch. Stop dreaming about your weeds and focus on your 401k. My mother added, "Don't be difficult, dear. It's not attractive." That was the moment I learned to be quiet. I learned that the loudest person in the room is usually the one with the least amount of real information. My family traded in loud, immediate declarations: $560,000 for a house, a funded gap year, a label of failure delivered over dinner. They operated in the bright, obvious world of cash transactions and public announcements. I learned to operate in the silence of the county clerk's office. I learned to let paperwork mature like a high-yield bond. I'd let them forget I owned the land. I let them call it worthless. I let them build their entire narrative of my failure around it, while I quietly tended to the legal fences, updating the contact information, ensuring the tax payments were recorded, and filing a small, quiet title action just to clear up any ancient ambiguities in the deed. My silence was an investment. I waited, and the market finally turned. The catalyst wasn't a zoning change. It was a save-the-date card. It arrived in my mailbox. Thick cardstock, beige and cream, embossed with elegant script. Everly Collier and Tate Morrison are getting married. I knew Tate, not just as Everly's charming, handsome fiancé. Tate Morrison was the vice president of finance for the Gray Line East Branch. He was the man who signed off on the budget projections for the very developments I helped shepherd through zoning. He was ambitious, sharp, and, I knew from office chatter, desperate to get into the West Hollow division, the most prestigious real estate market in the county. And now, my parents were handing him and Everly $560,000 to buy a house in that exact market. A beautiful white house, a house whose only driveway ran directly, indisputably, and illegally across my patch of weeds. I looked at the save-the-date card, then at the GIS map on my monitor. The pieces clicked into place with the cold, satisfying finality of a deadbolt. My family, my company, my land, their money. It wasn't a family dinner. It wasn't a real estate transaction. It was a chessboard, and they had just moved their queen onto my square. Lot 17B, on paper, is a cartographer's mistake. It's defined by a narrow, 20-foot-wide entrance from West Hollow Road, a classic bottleneck that runs for about 200 feet before opening into a landlocked half-acre square. The original 1972 subdivision survey markers, rusted iron pins capped in plastic, are still there, swallowed by overgrown brush and half-buried in seasons of fallen leaves. I know exactly where they are. I've checked them myself with a handheld GPS unit. The driveway my sister so admired in the photograph, the one that provides the sole ingress and egress for her new home, bisects this narrow strip. It does so by the grace of a document filed in 1949, when the land was part of a single farm. It grants a conditional right-of-way for agricultural access. The language is archaic and vague, contingent on the land remaining undeveloped. It was a handshake deal, memorialized on brittle, yellowing paper. A legal ghost that no modern title insurance company, focused on high-dollar mortgages, would ever have the diligence to unearth for a parcel with a tax assessment of a few $1,000s. They saw a gravel path and assumed it was permanent. An assumption is the most expensive mistake in real estate. Years before Everly even met Tate, I began insulating the asset. My first move was to create a legal entity, the Fieldglass Trust. It's a simple, revocable living trust, the kind of instrument used for estate planning and asset protection. I drafted the documents myself, using templates from my work, and having them reviewed by a junior attorney I knew in exchange for a bottle of good whiskey. I was the sole trustee. Then, through a quitclaim deed, Rhea Collier transferred ownership of Parcel 17B to the Fieldglass Trust for the sum of $1. On the public record, my name vanished from the property. It now belonged to an anonymous legal fiction. This wasn't about hiding. It was about professional distance. When the time came, they would not be dealing with their daughter and sister. They would be dealing with a trust. My next step was to solidify the trust's claim. I initiated a quiet title action. It sounds more dramatic than it is. It's a lawsuit against the entire world, asking any and all potential claimants to a piece of property to present their case or forever forfeit the right. Given that 17B had been a forgotten scrap for half a century, there were no other claimants. The proceedings were a formality. I submitted my chain of title, the original deed from my grandparents, and the fresh survey I'd commissioned. A judge issued a decree, a clean and modern document that extinguished any ancient, unrecorded claims and affirmed the Fieldglass Trust as the sole, undisputed owner of the property with the exact boundaries I had marked. The old, rusty pins were now backed by the full weight of a court order. The legal fences were now electrified. With ownership secured and anonymized, I began the research phase. This was my work, my expertise. My nights were spent on the Everlyn County and Norfield Township websites, digital archives that are a goldmine for those who know where to look. I downloaded 2 decades of town council meeting minutes, every proposed zoning amendment, and all public works planning documents. I layered satellite images from different years, tracking the slow creep of development. And then I found it, buried in Appendix C of a 150-page report from 5 years ago. The Norfield Greenway Plan 2035. It was a long-term municipal dream, a proposal to create a network of pedestrian and cycling paths connecting the town's parks and residential areas. One of the proposed corridors, designated Corridor 7, was a perfect line that ran from West Hollow Road, straight through the narrow neck of Lot 17B, and connected to a public park behind it. It was my land. The plan was just a proposal, unfunded and aspirational, but it gave me a critical piece of vocabulary: public good. I dug deeper, into the state statutes the plan cited. I found the specific legal framework for converting private rights-of-way into public greenways. And there it was, the mechanism, the gear that would turn the whole machine. If an easement, even a disputed, conditional one like mine, was repurposed for a designated public greenway, the municipality had the right to regulate its use to ensure public safety. This included the authority to restrict motorized vehicle access, either entirely or by specific hours. The path to their front door didn't need a gate. It just needed a sign with hours of operation. The following week, I filed the paperwork to register a new business entity in the state, a single-member LLC. I called it Juniper Walk LLC. Its stated purpose was to facilitate the development of community recreational pathways. I designed a simple logo. I opened a business checking account with a $100 deposit. I was now a potential community partner, a sponsor waiting for a cause. The final piece of confirmation came, as it so often does in my family, through carelessness. I was at my parents' house to pick up some mail that had been mistakenly sent there. On the granite kitchen island, next to a bowl of decorative artichokes, sat a thick stack of papers held together with a binder clip. Everly and Tate's purchase and sale agreement for the West Hollow house. I didn't have to snoop. The top page was a summary sheet. My eyes, trained to scan for keywords, moved past the purchase price, the closing date, the mortgage contingency. I was looking for the easement. A standard, thorough agreement for a property with shared access would have a dedicated, multi-page appendix, a permanent easement and maintenance agreement, with surveys, clear definitions of rights, and notarized signatures. There was no such appendix. Instead, I saw a single sentence buried in the general property description. Clause 11, Section D. Access to the property is provided via a recorded right-of-way over Parcel 17B, subject to any and all existing conditions and restrictions of record. It was lazy boilerplate, a cut-and-paste job by an overworked real estate attorney who didn't bother to pull the old deeds. They hadn't secured a permanent easement because they never even realized they needed one. They assumed the driveway was theirs. They assumed the paper from 1949 was sufficient. And then I saw the kill shot. A standard, almost meaningless clause in nearly every real estate contract. Clause 28. This agreement is subject to all local, state, and federal laws and regulations. The use of any associated easements may be altered or terminated if such change is deemed necessary for the public good by a governing body. It was a folding knife. Small, standard issue, easily overlooked. But in the right hands, it could cut to the bone. They had signed a contract that explicitly acknowledged their access could be terminated for the public good. And I had the Greenway plan that defined the public good as a walking path that would render their driveway unusable for most of the day. I took out my phone and snapped a clear photo of those two clauses. I didn't touch the papers. I left them right there next to the artichokes. Back in my apartment, I created a new folder on my secure hard drive. I dragged everything into it. The deed for 17B, the formation documents for the Fieldglass Trust and Juniper Walk LLC, the court order from the Quiet Title Action, the PDF of the Greenway Plan 2035, the state statutes on easement conversion, and the photo of the clauses from their contract. I right-clicked on the folder. I selected Rename. I typed a single word. Failure. The engine of Grayline Holdings is acquisition. We don't build, we buy. Rezone and leverage. The air on the 14th floor is a pressurized mix of stale coffee, industrial carpet cleaner, and muted, high-stakes anxiety. My boss, Marcus Vander, lives for this environment. He's a man who wears his ambition like an oversized suit, all sharp angles and loud pronouncements. He believes the loudest voice in the room chairs the meeting. He was pacing in front of the executive boardroom's smart screen, his reflection sliding across a satellite map of West Hollow. "This," he boomed, slapping the screen with his open palm, "is the West Hollow Commons, a dead strip mall, a Class C liability, and we," he pointed to the room, "are going to turn it into a Class A, mixed-use gold mine." He clicked to the next slide. It was a financial projection, and it was bleeding red. "The problem," he continued, "is the town council. They're tree huggers. They won't approve our density variance for the residential component unless we give them a massive community benefit. They're playing hardball on the tax abatements." He clicked again. A new map appeared. This one from the Norfield Township Planning Department. It was highlighted in green. "And this is our key," he said, a shark's smile spreading across his face. "The Greenway Plan 2035, it's their pet project, but it's completely unfunded. They want a pedestrian corridor from West Hollow Road to the public park. We're going to give it to them. We will fund the development of Corridor 7, soup to nuts. In exchange, they give us our variance, our tax breaks, and the keys to the city." I sat at the back of the table, silent, my laptop open. My face was a mask of neutral professional interest. Inside, I was perfectly, coldly still. His green-highlighted Corridor 7 was a precise digital overlay of my land. Lot 17B, Vander, in his hunt for leverage, had stumbled onto the exact tool I had spent a decade sharpening. He saw a line on a municipal dream sheet. He had no idea he was proposing to build a public park on private land. He had no idea the land was mine. I said nothing. My entire career at Grayline had been built on knowing the details Vander was too important to read. The collision of my two worlds, the family that scorned me and the company that exploited me, happened, as I knew it must, by the elevators. Tate Morrison, my sister's fiancé and the VP of Finance at our East Branch, stepped out, holding a Starbucks cup like a trophy. He was all polished loafers, perfect teeth, and the effortless confidence of a man who has never paid for his own failures. "Rhea, just the woman I wanted to see," he said, his voice booming with the false camaraderie of the corporate ladder. "Heard your running point on the West Hollow Greenway. Fantastic synergy." "I'm handling the entitlements. Tate, just the diligence," I replied, my tone flat. "It's brilliant, just brilliant," He lowered his voice, as if sharing a valuable secret. "Everly and I just closed on that white clapboard house off West Hollow Road. The one with the long birch driveway? We're going to be neighbors." I affected a look of mild surprise. "Oh, the old Crawford estate?" "That's the one. And the best part," he grinned, "is that the new greenway, your project, is going to run right along our driveway. It's perfect. A private walking path straight to the park. Everly is over the moon. The value add is incredible." He was giddy. He saw his company sponsoring a public amenity that was, in his mind, a private upgrade for his new home, a home purchased with my parents' money. It was the perfect ecosystem of entitlement. He saw a walking path. He had fundamentally forgotten that he needed a driveway. "That's wonderful, Tate. Congratulations," I said. My voice didn't even waver. "We all win, right?" he beamed, clapping me on the shoulder. "Gotta run. See you at the hearing." I watched him walk away. He was a man whistling past a landmine, convinced it was a gold coin. The presentation to the Norfield Town Council was scheduled for the following Tuesday morning. Vander called me into his glass-walled office. The blinds were drawn halfway, cutting the room into stripes of light and shadow. "Collier," he said, not looking up from his monitor. "That deck for the council, it needs to be surgical. I want the financials, the community engagement gloss, the environmental impact. You build the slides. I'll do the talking." "Of course, Marcus." I spent the next 2 days crafting a masterpiece of corporate persuasion. It was all fruit, no seeds. I built slides showing happy families biking, projected increases in property values, and the vibrant, eco-friendly future of West Hollow. It was beautiful, persuasive, and completely hollow. Then, I inserted the one slide that mattered. Slide 14. Ownership and Access. Corridor 7. It was a simple, technical slide showing the plat map of 17B, and beneath it, 2 bullet points. Current legal owner, the Fieldglass Trust. Access status, contingent on owner consent and easement modification. I saved the presentation to the shared server and went to the break room to refill my water. When I returned 2 minutes later, an email notification was already on my screen. Vander M. has made edits to West Hollow Greenway presentation draft. I opened the file. My 40-slide deck was intact. He'd even added a few more graphics of smiling children, but he had changed slide 14. He had deleted it. In its place was a new slide 14, now titled A Path Forward. He had removed the plat map. He had removed all mention of the Fieldglass Trust. He had replaced my technical bullets with a single, generic line. Access for Corridor 7 to be finalized via existing municipal right-of-way agreements. It was a clean, efficient, corporate lie. He was solving the problem of land ownership by simply deleting the slide that mentioned it. He had erased the obstacle. And he had erased me, in the footer, where it had read, "Prepared by R. Collier, Redevelopment Division." It now read, "Presentation by Marcus Vander, Division Head." He strode past my desk a moment later, jacket slung over his shoulder. "Deck looks solid. Collier, I streamlined some of that legal jargon. Too complicated. Just make sure the projector's warmed up on Tuesday. Don't need any technical glitches." He didn't just steal the work. He was demoting me to AV support. I looked up from my screen, my expression placid. I even gave him a small smile. "Of course, Marcus. It's fine. I'm just a failure. Anyway." He blinked, not registering the words, only the compliance. "Good. Don't be late." I watched him go. I did not complain to HR. I did not send a scathing email. Protests are for people with no power. I had the land. Instead, I opened a new email. My fingers were steady on the keyboard. I sent it only to Vander, but I CC'd the head of Greyline's legal department and the compliance officer assigned to the West Hollow project. Subject: West Hollow Greenway. Final file for public record. Marcus. Per your streamlining, the presentation deck is finalized and ready for submission to the town clerk. As a final due diligence item, please note that Norfield Town Charter 8 Hollow went. A requires affirmative recorded consent from the legal owner of any private parcel being converted to public use. The current owner of record for parcel 17B is the Fieldglass Trust. To ensure the Council's vote is valid, I've added a placeholder line to the formal application for owner consent, Fieldglass Trust. Please ensure this is executed before the hearing. Thanks, Ria. I hit send. It was not an accusation. It was an act of administrative assistance. I was helping him, ensuring his project didn't fail on a technicality. I was also creating an indelible, time-stamped paper trail, proving that he and Greyline's legal team were made formally aware of the trust's existence and the consent requirement. My computer pinged. Vander, M, has read your message. A minute passed. I could see him through the glass, his face darkening. He was stabbing at his keyboard. A new email slammed into my inbox. Subject: West Hollow Greenway. I'll handle the trust. Stop burying me in procedural nonsense. This is a multi-million-dollar deal, not a college zoning class. I need you focused on the logistics, not the footnotes. He thought Fieldglass Trust was some dormant entity, some old farmer he could roll over or buy off for a few $1,000s. He didn't ask me who they were. He didn't bother to run the name through the state's corporate registry. He just assumed it was the family disease. I let him. I watched as he went back into the presentation and deleted the placeholder I had added to the formal application. He was actively, knowingly submitting a fraudulent document to the town council. I minimized my email. I had done my part. I opened my calendar. The council meeting was Tuesday, 9:00 a.m. I opened a web browser and booked a mobile notary public. The appointment was for 8:55 a.m., Tuesday, in the lobby of the Norfield Town Hall. Then I unlocked a file from my failure folder. I printed a single, one-page document. Easement modification and grant of public access, parcel 17B, Norfield. The text was dense, but the operative clause was crystal clear. It stated that the Fieldglass Trust, as the undisputed owner, in consideration of the Greenway 2035 plan, hereby granted a public pedestrian easement. It was the final sentence that held the leverage. This grant is contingent upon the following necessary safety restriction: to ensure public safety and prevent conflict between pedestrians and vehicles on the narrow corridor. All non-emergency motorized vehicle access on Parcel 17B is prohibited between the hours of 7:00 a.m. and 7:00 Monday through Friday, and is prohibited 24 hours a day on weekends and all public holidays. I had just made their driveway illegal to use during the day, and illegal to use at all on the weekends. I had turned their grand entrance into a walking path that would only allow them to drive to their house in the middle of the night on a workday. I placed the document in my briefcase, next to my company ID. I went back to analyzing utility setbacks. Vander was in his office, practicing his speech, his voice a confident, arrogant rumble. I just kept working. A proposal is an argument. A successful argument is built on receipts. In the week leading up to the town council hearing, I became a quiet, methodical auditor, gathering the evidence that would prove my case. This wasn't about emotion. It was about documentation. My first exhibits were photographic. I spent a Saturday morning parked in a public spot with a clear view of the entrance to Lot 17B. I used a telephoto lens, the kind used for birdwatching, from 7:30 a.m. to 9:00 a.m. I documented the traffic. I captured an Amazon Prime van, its blue logo a stark contrast to the bucolic birches, performing a 10-point turn to get out after realizing the driveway was a dead end. I photographed a landscaping truck blocking the entire narrow entrance while its crew unloaded mowers, forcing a resident in a BMW to wait on the main road. I shot a sequence of a food delivery driver in a sedan speeding down the gravel path, kicking up dust, clearly frustrated and late. The metadata on each digital file was a time-stamped, unimpeachable record of the problem. Next, I turned to public records, my native habitat. A simple keyword search in the Norfield Township Police Blotter Archive for West Hollow Road and traffic complaint yielded 3 official reports in the last 18 months. I printed the PDFs. Vehicle traveling at an estimated 40 mph down the private access lane. Read 1. Delivery truck blocked access for 10 minutes. Driver was hostile. Read another. These were no longer just my observations. They were documented community grievances. With the problem established, I provided the solution, citing the town's own code. I pulled the Norfield Traffic Safety Ordinances, Section 4, Private Roads and Rights of Way. I highlighted the key passage. Any private access route with a width of less than 25 feet and a sightline of less than 150 feet is strongly recommended for conversion to non-motorized pedestrian use to mitigate potential vehicle-pedestrian conflict. The entrance to 17B was 20 feet wide. The sightline, thanks to a curve and a cluster of old-growth oaks, was barely 100 feet. I wasn't just suggesting a change. I was enforcing their own safety recommendations. Then came the emotional leverage, the appeal to the community, through my LLC, Juniper Walk. I drafted a letter to the principal of West Hollow Elementary, located a quarter-mile down the road. The letter outlined the proposed Juniper Walk Greenway as a safe, off-street route for students walking to and from the nearby park. 2 days later, I received a response on official school letterhead. The principal was enthusiastic, writing, "The safety of our students is our paramount concern, and we wholeheartedly endorse any community initiative that provides safer pedestrian pathways." I scanned her letter. It was now part of the file. To bind Grayline to the project, I needed their own words. I went back to Vander's proposal, the one he had proudly presented to the executive committee. I copied and pasted his community commitment section into a separate document. Grayline Holdings pledges to fully fund the creation of the Greenway, it read, as a tangible and lasting community benefit, demonstrating our commitment to a safer, healthier, and more connected Norfield. He had tied his company's reputation and his project's budget to this path. I printed it out. His promise was now my receipt. The final piece of evidence was personal. It was not for the council or for Grayline. It was for me. I scrolled back through years of text messages from my mother, a digital archaeology of dismissals and critiques. I found the one from the night she and my father transferred the house money to Everly. The screen glowed with the blue text bubble. "I know you're disappointed, Rhea, but you have to accept who you are. You're just not someone who knows how to make money. It's not a failing. It's just a fact." I took a screenshot. I printed it in high resolution on photo paper. The words were stark and black against the glossy white. I didn't fold it. I took a single paperclip and attached it to the inside cover of the leather-bound portfolio I was preparing for the hearing. It wasn't evidence. It was fuel. On Monday afternoon, the day before the hearing, I executed the legal instrument. In my quiet apartment, I laid the easement modification and grant of public access on my dining table. The document was a page and a half of dense legalese, but its purpose was simple. As the trustee for the Fieldglass Trust, I was granting the town the public access they wanted, and in exchange, I was imposing the safety restrictions they needed. The vehicular access limitations were not a punishment. They were framed as a necessary condition of the grant to ensure public safety. The final clause made the entire document a Trojan horse. This grant and modification shall become effective immediately and automatically upon a majority vote by the Norfield Town Council, approving the project designated as the Greenway Plan 2035, and accepting the associated funding from Grayline Holdings. They wouldn't just be voting for a park path. They would be unknowingly activating the trigger that crippled the access to my sister's new house. I signed the document at the bottom. Rhea E. Collier, trustee for the Fieldglass Trust. My signature was firm and clear. My next step was to make it a matter of public record before the meeting even began. I scanned the signed and notarized document. I logged into the Norfield Township Public Records portal, a clunky but functional interface I knew better than my own online banking. I navigated to the Submissions for Town Council Agenda section. I uploaded the PDF with a simple, neutral title. Correspondence from Fieldglass Trust Re-Agenda Item 7B, West Hollow Greenway. It was now officially in their system. time-stamped, available to the town clerk, the town attorney, and anyone else who bothered to look. Vander wouldn't. He was too busy rehearsing his speech. Finally, I set a single alarm on my phone for 8:59 a.m. the next morning. The label was a simple command: submit owner consent, open session. This was the digital copy, the one I would email to the entire council and the clerk the minute before the session started, ensuring there was no ambiguity about when and how it was received. My preparations were complete. I laid out my suit for the morning: a simple dark gray jacket and matching trousers. It was the uniform of a competent, unremarkable professional. From my desk drawer, I took a fountain pen, one with a dark green lacquer finish. I checked the ink cartridge. It was full. I placed it in the inside pocket of the suit jacket. As I rode the elevator down from my apartment for a final pre-hearing walk, I caught my reflection in the polished steel doors. My face was placid. There were no signs of stress, no nervous tics. The woman in the reflection was not a victim seeking revenge. She was a project manager who had done her due diligence. She had all her permits in order. She had all her receipts. And she was, to my own surprise, perfectly and profoundly calm. The Norfield Town Hall meeting room smelled of old paper, weak coffee, and the faint, woolly scent of damp coats. It was a chamber built for the mundane business of local governance. But on this Tuesday morning, it was packed. Residents in fleece vests, local business owners in ill-fitting suits, and a handful of reporters from the local paper filled the worn wooden benches. I sat in the third row, alone. My briefcase was on the floor between my feet. My family, my mother, Everly, and Tate sat in the front row, directly behind Vander, a united front of support for their project. Vander was at the podium, in his element. He was a conductor, and this was his symphony of progress. He clicked through the presentation I had built, his voice smooth and resonant, filling the room. And so, the West Hollow Greenway isn't just a path, he declared, gesturing to a slide of a CGI family laughing on brand-new bicycles. It's a promise of a safer community, a promise of higher property values, a promise of a partnership between private enterprise and public well-being. Greyline Holdings isn't just funding a project, we are investing in Norfield's future. He was brilliant. I had to give him that. He painted a picture so vivid and appealing that no one would ever think to question the canvas it was painted on. He spoke of synergy, community, and forward-thinking development. He was selling them a dream. My eyes were on the clock at the back of the room, 8:57. Tate was watching Vander with an expression of pure admiration. He was looking at his future, a future where his company was a local hero and his new house came with a privately funded, semi-private park entrance. Everly was beaming, squeezing his hand. My mother sat straight-backed, a portrait of civic pride, the mother of the bride-to-be whose fiancé was so well-connected, whose family was making all the right moves. 8:58. Vander moved towards his crescendo. He clicked to the slide titled A Path Forward, the one where he had erased my work and my name. The path forward is clear, he said, his voice dropping to a confidential, serious tone. The access for Corridor 7 will be finalized through existing municipal right-of-way agreements, ensuring a smooth and seamless integration into the town's existing infrastructure. This is a turnkey solution. Council members, all it requires is your vision and your vote. He was a magician, distracting the audience with one hand while palming the truth with the other. Existing municipal right-of-way agreements was a masterful piece of misdirection. It sounded official, legal, and boring. It implied the town already had control. It was a complete fabrication. The clock on the wall ticked to 8:59. Under the lip of the bench, my thumb swiped my phone screen awake. I opened my pre-drafted email. The recipients were the 5 members of the town council and the town clerk. The subject line was neutral. Owner consent document for agenda item 7B. The attached file was the signed, notarized easement modification. My finger hovered over the blue send icon. The council president, a weary-looking man named Arthur Finch, cleared his throat. "Thank you, Mr. Vander, a very ambitious proposal. The council appreciates Greyline's generous offer. As Finch began to speak, I pressed send. The icon vanished. A small sending message appeared, then disappeared. Sent, 8:59 a.m. On the dais, the town clerk, a woman with a formidable tower of white hair, glanced down at her tablet. Her eyebrows shot up. She leaned over and whispered to Finch, tapping her screen. Finch frowned, then peered at his own device. He looked up, his expression shifting from procedural boredom to genuine confusion. "Mr. Vander," Finch said, his voice now holding a new, sharper tone. "We appear to have just received a submission related to this agenda item, a document from a Fieldglass Trust?" Vander's confident smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He recovered quickly. "Just a formality, Mr. President, a minor landowner. We're handling it." "Well," Finch said, looking at the document on his screen, "it appears they have handled it. This is a notarized grant of access, but it includes several conditions." He looked out over the audience, his eyes scanning the faces. "Is there a representative of the Fieldglass Trust present this morning?" The room was silent. A low murmur rippled through the benches. Vander stood frozen at the podium, his face a mask of controlled fury. In the front row, Tate leaned forward, whispering to Everly. My mother's perfect posture didn't waver. I took a slow breath. I stood up. My movement was small, but in the silent room, it felt seismic. Every head turned towards me. "I am," I said. My voice was calm and clear, carrying easily in the room's quiet acoustics. The shift in the front row was instantaneous and profound. It was like watching a photograph develop in reverse, the color draining from their faces. Tate's jaw went slack. He stared at me, his eyes wide with a dawning, horrified comprehension. Everly's hand flew to her mouth, her expression one of utter, childlike bewilderment. But my mother's reaction was the most telling. She didn't look shocked. She looked betrayed. Her face hardened, her eyes narrowing into slits of ice. She understood. Not the legal mechanics, but the intent. She understood that this was an act of war. Finch peered at me over his reading glasses. "You are the trustee for Fieldglass Trust?" "That is correct, Mr. President," I said. "And you have submitted this easement modification?" "Yes, to facilitate the council's vote and ensure the project can move forward in accordance with state and local laws." I was helping. Just a good citizen, ensuring a smooth process. Vander finally found his voice. It was strained. "This is a procedural ambush. We had an agreement." "We have no agreement with Greyline Holdings. Mr. Vander," I said, addressing him directly for the first time. "The trust has an agreement with the town of Norfield, contingent on your proposal's approval." Finch looked to his left, at the town council, a sharp woman named Maria Flores. "Ms. Flores, are these conditions legally binding if we accept the grant?" Flores had the document on her own tablet. She scrolled through it, her expression unreadable. She looked up, her gaze clinical. "The document is a standard grant of easement with conditions precedent. The owner of a private parcel is within their rights to place reasonable restrictions on any easement they grant, especially when said grant is for the public good." She paused, then delivered the final, fatal blow. "The safety restrictions cited herein, specifically limiting vehicular access on a narrow, substandard right-of-way to mitigate pedestrian risk, are not only reasonable, they are consistent with the town's own long-range safety recommendations. If the council votes to approve the Greenway project and accept the funding, it will be implicitly accepting this grant and its conditions as a package deal." It was over. The trap had closed. I summarized it for them, my voice devoid of triumph. "To be clear for the record, the trust fully supports the Greenway. It is a wonderful community benefit. We are granting the pedestrian access required. However, the existing conditional right-of-way for vehicles is, as Ms. Flores noted, a safety hazard. Therefore, As a condition of the new public greenway, daily motorized vehicle access to the residents on the adjacent lot will be restricted to the hours between 7:00 p.m. and 7:00 a.m. on weekdays. It will be prohibited on weekends and holidays. Emergency vehicle access, of course, is preserved by state statute. You could hear a pin drop. Someone in the back of the room gasped. The dream house my sister had just bought, the one with the idyllic driveway, was now accessible only by night. Its beautiful private road had become a public park that its owners couldn't use. Finch looked at Vander. Mr. Vander? Do you and Greyline Holdings wish to proceed with your funding offer under these conditions? Vander was trapped. His entire deal, the tax abatements, the zoning variants, it was all tied to the Greenway. If he backed out now, he would look like a fool. His project would die, and he would have to explain to the board why he failed to do the most basic due diligence on land acquisition. His jaw worked, but no sound came out. He just gave a single, jerky nod. Very well, Finch said. The motion on the floor is to approve the West Hollow Greenway Plan 2035, funded by Greyline Holdings, and to accept the associated grant of easement and its conditions as submitted by the Fieldglass Trust. All in favor? 5 hands on the dais went up. Opposed? Silence. The motion passes. 5-0, Finch announced, banging his gavel. The Greenway is approved. A smattering of applause broke out from the residents in the back. The ones who just wanted a safe place for their kids to bike. It was a hollow, surreal sound. I sat down. My phone vibrated in my jacket pocket. I didn't need to look. I could feel the rage humming through the screen. I calmly pulled it out. A single text message from Vander. Who the hell are you? My thumbs moved quickly, typing out the answer I had been holding for 14 years. Failure, with land. The vote was on a Tuesday, the town of Norfield. Energized by a sudden and substantial donation from Greyline Holdings, moved with a speed that was almost terrifying. By Thursday afternoon, a public works crew had graded the gravel path, rolled it flat, and installed the official signage. The signs were beautiful, dark green metal, reflective white lettering, mounted on sturdy U-channel posts at the exact entrance to Lot 17B. Juniper Walk, Greenway. Public access, dawn to dusk. No motorized vehicles. 7:02 a.m., 7:02 p.m., Mon-free, and all day, sat sun, violators will be towed, Norfield Ord, 11:23. Everly's housewarming party was scheduled for that Saturday. A 4:00 p.m. garden party. It was meant to be her grand debut into West Hollow society. String lights, a bespoke cocktail bar, and a guest list that included half of Tate's executive team and all of my parents' aspirations. My invitation, unsurprisingly, had been rescinded via a series of furious, incoherent texts from Everly that ended with, "Don't you dare come." I had no intention of attending the party. I was just going for a walk on the new public greenway. I parked my car a quarter mile down the road at the public park, the one my greenway now connected to. It was 4:30 p.m., the golden hour, and the party should have been in full swing. As I approached the entrance to my land, their driveway, the scene was one of glorious, escalating chaos. A large stainless steel catering truck was parked at an awkward angle on the grass verge of West Hollow Road, its hazard lights flashing in weak protest. Its rear doors were wide open, revealing racks of untouched, foil-covered trays. The driver, a man in a white chef's coat, was standing by the new Greenway sign, smoking a cigarette and yelling into his phone. "I don't care what the work order says, boss. There's a sign, a brand new sign. It says no vehicles. I'm not getting a $400 ticket and 3 points on my license for some rich lady's prosciutto." A small bottleneck of expensive cars was forming behind him. Guests, arriving in their polished Teslas and black-on-black Range Rovers, were slowing down, confused. They pointed at the sign, then at the catering truck. Some were attempting to park on the narrow shoulder, their tires sinking into the soft, rain-dampened grass. I kept walking, my pace steady, my expression one of pleasant civic appreciation for the new path. As I got closer, I saw Tate. He was standing in the middle of the gravel path, halfway between the house and the road. His party host uniform, a pastel linen shirt, white trousers, and boat shoes worn without socks, was already rumpled. He was frantically waving his arms at the catering driver, who simply blew a plume of smoke and pointed emphatically back at the sign. Then, my phone buzzed. The screen displayed Tate's name. I stopped my walk, standing about 30 feet from him, and answered. "Hello, Tate?" "Rhea, thank God. You've got to do something." His voice was a high-pitched, strangled whisper of pure panic. "The caterers! They're stuck at the road. They won't drive in. You have to tell them it's okay. You have to take down the sign. You're the only one who can fix this." I looked at the sign, then at him. I feigned confusion. "Do what, Tate? What am I supposed to do?" "Fix this. This is your doing. You called the town. You put up this sign. You're ruining everything. My boss is here. Everly's entire family is here. The food, all the food is on the side of the road. Tate," I said, my voice deliberately slow and patient, as if explaining a complex concept to a kindergartner. "I didn't put up the sign. The town of Norfield did. It's called municipal governance. Are you asking me to tell you to break the law? Because as a representative of Gray Line Holdings, I'm pretty sure that would be a compliance violation." "God damn it, Rhea, don't play these games," he hissed. "This is my house, our party." "That does sound stressful," I said. "It looks like your vehicular access is restricted, per the easement. You really should have read the documents." While he sputtered, a family of 4, a mom, a dad, 2 kids on small bicycles with streamers, pedaled past me onto the greenway. They smiled. "This is just wonderful, isn't it?" the mother said to me. "So much safer for the kids. We've been waiting for this." "It really is," I replied with a warm smile. "Have a great ride." They cycled past Tate, who looked at them as if they'd just materialized from another dimension. The father called out, "Great party!" Nodding toward the house. Tate just stared, his face a mottled, unhealthy shade of red. I could see the guests mingling on the pristine lawn, looking back toward the road, wondering where the food and, more importantly, the bar service were. A few minutes later, a neighbor I recognized from the hearing, an avid runner in neon yellow, jogged past. She stopped, snapped a picture of the Greenway sign with her phone, and then one of the chaotic parking situation. "Finally," she said to me, tapping out a post. "So glad they're enforcing this. People used to speed down this path like it was a highway. Safety first, Norfield. Greenway kids safe." Tate's panic was visibly curdling into pure rage. He started walking toward me. You bitch," he spat. "I'd be careful with that kind of language." "Tate," I said, holding my phone up slightly. "You never know who's recording. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm enjoying a public right-of-way." I hung up. I continued my walk, ambling slowly up the gravel path. Past him. I was on my land. He was on my land. I walked right past the beautiful white clapboard house, noting that the string lights were, in fact, very tastefully done. The guests on the lawn watched me with confused expressions. I looked like any other local resident, out for a stroll. I was almost to the end of the path when I heard a new, official-sounding voice. I turned. A white Ford Ranger with the Norfield Township Code Enforcement logo had just pulled up. A man in a crisp uniform got out, clipboard in hand. He was talking to the catering driver. The caterer, now fully vindicated, pointed. "I told him, officer, sign says no vehicles, but that guy," he pointed at Tate, "told me to ignore it and drive on the path. And look at all these cars parked on the easement." The officer sighed. He was just a guy on a Saturday shift wanting to get home. He started walking toward Tate, who now looked like he was about to have a full-blown aneurysm. This was my cue. I walked back toward them, pulling a file from the slim portfolio I was carrying. "Excuse me, officer," I said, my voice polite and helpful. He turned, Ma'am, is this your party? Goodness, no, I said. I'm the trustee for the Field Glass Trust, the entity that owns this pathway. I just wanted to provide you with the documentation, in case there was any confusion. I handed him the folder. It contained the court-ordered quiet title deed, the recorded easement modification, and a copy of the town council meeting minutes approving the plan. The officer's face cleared as he scanned the first page. He understood. This wasn't a party dispute. It was a property dispute, and it was already settled. The paper was clean. Field Glass Trust, right, he said, nodding. You granted the easement with the time restrictions. It's all by the book. He looked up at Tate, his expression now firm. Sir, this pathway is a designated pedestrian greenway. You can't have these vehicles here. The caterer is right. He can't drive up to the house. And all these cars. He gestured to the Range Rovers and Teslas parked illegally on the grass. Are in violation. They're blocking a public right-of-way. You need to have them moved immediately, or I start writing tickets. And that truck, he pointed to the caterer, needs to move. He's blocking the road. This was the precise moment Everly chose to make her entrance. She came storming down the lawn from the house, her face blotchy with tears and rage. Her perfect silk garden party dress wrinkled. What is going on? Tate, why is the officer here? Where is the food? And then she saw me. Her face crumpled, and the grief instantly gave way to a primal, guttural scream. You! She lunged at me, but Tate, to his credit, caught her by the arm. You did this! She shrieked, tears streaming down her face, ruining her expensive makeup. You planned this. You ruined my house. You ruined my party. You are ruining my life. The guests on the lawn were all watching now. A silent, horrified audience. The caterer was filming it on his phone. I stood perfectly still. I waited for her to run out of breath. When she was just sobbing, I looked her right in the eye. My voice was not loud, but it was cold and sharp, and it cut through the air. I didn't do anything. Everly, you did. You got the house. You just forgot to check on the access. Get out, she sobbed. Get off my property. This isn't your property, I said, tapping my foot on the gravel. This is mine. You're the one trespassing on my land. That was when my mother, who must have been watching from the porch, finally moved. She marched down the lawn, her face a mask of controlled fury, her heels sinking slightly into the turf. She didn't look at Everly or Tate. She walked directly to me and grabbed my arm, her manicured nails digging into my sleeve. Rhea Collier, she whispered, her voice a low, venomous hiss. You stop this, right now. You are making a scene. You are humiliating this family. I looked down at her hand on my arm. Then I looked up into her eyes. I felt nothing. No fear, no anger, just the cold, clear finality of a balance sheet being zeroed out. I didn't pull my arm away. I simply raised my other hand and pointed. I pointed directly at the brand new, reflective green sign that stood at the head of the path, gleaming in the late afternoon sun. Which family? Mom? I asked, my voice as calm as the evening air. You're worried about that family? I pointed to Everly, who was now weeping on Tate's shoulder. The one you bought a house for? I turned my gaze back to her. That sign, I said, pointing at the words, no motorized vehicles, is your signature. It's just the legal version of the note you gave me, the one where you told me I was a failure and I should learn to accept it. I did. I pulled my arm free from her grasp. She recoiled, as if I had burned her. Her mouth opened. But for the first time in my life, my mother had absolutely nothing to say. Her entire script had been erased. Silence. The only sound was the distant traffic on the main road and the chirping of birds in the birch trees. The caterer, having seen enough, made an executive decision. He started unloading the racks of food onto a rolling metal cart, but he didn't push it toward the house. He turned it around, the small metal wheels rattling loudly on the asphalt of West Hollow Road as he pushed it back toward his truck. The party was over, the food was going home, and I turned and walked away. my footsteps silent on the gravel I owned. The day after the disastrous housewarming was a Sunday. It was quiet, the calm before the professionally drafted, electronically delivered storm. At 9:01 a.m. on Monday morning, an email appeared in the dedicated inbox I had created for the Field Glass Trust. It was from a senior partner at a prestigious downtown law firm. Subject: Vehicular easement for 245 West Hollow Road. Dear Trustee, we represent the Morrison Collier family, owners of the property at 245 West Hollow Road. We write to formally request the immediate restoration of the 24/7 vehicular easement across Parcel 17B. My clients are prepared to discuss a reasonable accommodation to resolve this matter amicably. Sincerely, Preston Vance, S. They had hired the best. It didn't matter. The law wasn't on their side. I did not respond as Rhea Collier. I responded as the Field Glass Trust. My reply was sent at 10:15 a.m. It was not a letter. It was a proposal, formatted as a formal valuation sheet. Subject: Vehicular easement for 245 West Hollow Road. Proposal FT001. Dear Mr. Vance, thank you for your inquiry. The Field Glass Trust is amenable to discussing a permanent modification of the current access agreement for Parcel 17B. Please find our valuation and terms below. Valuation and offer. Asset: grant of a 30-year exclusive vehicular easement for Parcel 17B. Valuation basis: based on the unique and critical nature of the access, the loss of public amenity, conversion of a portion of the greenway back to private use, and the appraised value of the dominant estate, 245 West Hollow Road. The fair market value of this easement has been assessed. Purchase price: $560,000, $560,000.00. This offer is tendered as a single, indivisible package, contingent upon the following non-negotiable conditions. 1. Non-disparagement. Your clients will enter into a legally binding agreement to refrain from any and all public or private disparagement of the Field Glass Trust, Juniper Walk, LLC, or any associated trustees. 2. Professional separation. Mr. Tate Morrison will agree to a no-contact provision regarding all work-related matters with Gray Line Holdings employees involved in the West Hollow Greenway project. All future professional correspondence will be routed through corporate counsel. 3. Non-interference. Your clients will agree to take no action, legal or otherwise, that could impede, delay, or challenge the existence and public use of the Juniper Walk Greenway. This offer is valid for 72 hours. Sincerely, Trustee, Field Glass Trust. I hit send. I had named my price. It was the exact sum of the gift my parents had given Everly. They weren't just buying a driveway, they were paying me back, dollar for dollar, for the value they had assigned me. I anticipated their next move. 30 minutes later, a follow-up email arrived, a single line appended to my proposal. Please note that should your clients decline this offer, the current access restrictions as recorded with Norfield Township will be strictly enforced. The Trust has already provided the Norfield Fire Department and Emergency Medical Services with a key for the emergency access gate at the head of the path to ensure unimpeded entry for all first responders. The public good is, and will remain, protected. I had already solved the one problem they could have used against me. They couldn't claim I was endangering them. I was just inconveniencing them. To the letter of the law. The inevitable phone call came an hour later. It wasn't their lawyer. It was Tate. His number flashed on my personal cell. I let it go to voicemail. He immediately called the main line for the Field Glass Trust, a VoIP number that transcribed messages to my email. The transcription was a block of furious, garbled text. $560,000? Are you insane? Rhea, this is extortion. It's my house. What the hell are you doing? Call me back. This is insane. He was emotional. He was making mistakes. I had my lawyer, the same one who reviewed my trust documents, send a crisp, formal reply to Mr. Vance. Mr. Vance, please inform your client, Mr. Morrison, That all future communication must be directed through legal counsel. Direct contact with the trustee will be considered harassment. Then, I offered the alternative, the real trap. As a gesture of goodwill, the trust is prepared to offer an alternative to the outright purchase, a revocable, monthly access license. The fee will be 4% of the easement's assessed value, $20,400, for the first month, with a 10% escalator for each subsequent month of use. This license can be terminated by either party with 30 days' notice. It was a poison pill disguised as a compromise. A monthly lease would be a financial hemorrhage, the cost growing exponentially until it became completely untenable. It was designed to make the one-time payment of $560,000 look like a bargain. Now, they had to do the math. They were living in a multi-million-dollar house they couldn't drive to during the day. All deliveries, groceries, Amazon packages, furniture, would have to be left at the road and hand-carried 200 feet, or they could pay a premium for after-hours service. They couldn't have guests over for a weekend barbecue. They'd have to rent an off-site parking space and walk to their own front door. The beautiful, idyllic home had become a logistical nightmare, a prison of their own making. The carrying cost of their pride, I calculated, would far exceed my asking price within a year. The next call was from a number I knew well. Marcus Vander's direct line. I answered, but I didn't speak. I just pressed the 3-digit code that rerouted the call to the Gray Line Legal Department's compliance hotline. Vander, I said calmly, as soon as the automated "this call is being recorded" message chimed in the background. I'm forwarding you to legal. This seems to be a conflict of interest matter. I could hear him sputtering on the other end, his rage suddenly choked off by the realization that his tirade was now on the official record. I hung up before he could form a coherent, legally advisable sentence. While they were trapped in their calculations and their rage, I was moving on. I spent the afternoon finalizing 2 documents. The first was a directive for the Fieldglass Trust, instructing my attorney to establish a micro-ESOP, employee stock ownership plan, for the 4 junior analysts and administrative assistants on the West Hollow project team at Gray Line. The plan would be funded by a 30% allocation from the proceeds of the easement sale. It was a bonus they would never know came from me, a quiet reward for the work Vander would have otherwise taken full credit for. The second document was a purchase and sale agreement. I had found a property, a small, well-maintained triplex in the up-and-coming Northbridge neighborhood. It needed some cosmetic work, but the numbers were solid. The down payment required was $392,000. It was the exact amount that would be left over from the easement sale after the ESOP was funded. They were fighting to get money back. I was already turning it into a new asset. Their one-time gift to Everly was about to become my long-term, appreciating, cash-flowing investment. At 4 p.m., with the 72-hour deadline on my offer ticking down, I sent one last email. It went to my personal account, but I CC'd my mother, my father, Everly, and Tate. The subject line was 3 simple words. Subject: Failure Monetization Plan. The body of the email contained only a single attachment, a PDF of the signed purchase agreement for the Northbridge triplex, with the down payment amount clearly highlighted. I hit send. I shut down my computer. I checked my phone later that evening. No calls, no angry texts, just a profound, echoing silence. For the first time in my entire life, my mother had been rendered completely, utterly speechless. She had built her world on the power of words, labels, pronouncements, judgments. I had taken that power away with a balance sheet. You can't argue with a number that adds up. The notification arrived at 10:02 a.m. on Monday. It was not a dramatic announcement, but a quiet, sterile email from the bank that served the Fieldglass Trust. Subject: Incoming wire transfer notification. A wire transfer in the amount of $560,000 USD from First National Bank of Northfield has been successfully credited to your account. The number glowed on my screen, a string of pixels representing the total, calculated sum of my family's valuation of my sister, and now, the total, calculated sum of their defeat. It was not a gift, it was a settlement. I took a screenshot of the confirmation. I did not pause to savor the moment. This was not a victory lap. It was the execution of a project's final phase. I opened my email client and composed a new message to Preston Vance. Escrow. I attached the screenshot of the wire confirmation. The body of the email contained 3 words. Vehicular easement. Executed. I hit send. The contract was now complete. Their money was my money. Their access was their own. My next step was to close the loop. I logged into the online portal for Juniper Walk LLC. I initiated a one-time anonymous donation to the Norfield Parks Department for the sum of $50,000. The donation was earmarked for the Juniper Walk Greenway Enhancement Project, with a specific request that the funds be used to pave the path with permeable asphalt, add solar-powered lighting, and install permanent park benches along its length. My revenge would not just be a sign on a post. It would become a beloved, permanent, and beautifully lit piece of community infrastructure, forever maintained by the town, paid for with the money they had used to discard me. Then, I opened a new document. It was my letter of resignation from Gray Line Holdings. It was polite, professional, and effective immediately. I cited a desire to pursue independent real estate investment opportunities, but I attached one additional file to the email, which was addressed to the head of human resources and CC'd to every member of the Gray Line Corporate Ethics Committee. The file was a small audio clip, the recording of my call with Vander that had been captured by the compliance hotline. The transcript was damningly clear, a perfect record of him dismissing my concerns about the Field Glass Trust, taking my name off the presentation, and instructing me to ignore the legal realities of the project. It was a career-ending act of professional malfeasance, delivered quietly as an attachment to my goodbye note. I did not wait for a response. I blocked Vander's number and all Gray Line-affiliated email addresses. My business with them was concluded. That afternoon, I met my real estate agent at a small, quiet law office in Northbridge. The air smelled of old books and fresh coffee. The purchase and sale agreement for the triplex was laid out on a polished mahogany table. It was a tangible thing, a stack of paper representing a future I was building for myself. I took out the dark green fountain pen from my briefcase. I signed my name on each necessary line. Then I slid the cashier's check for the down payment across the table. $392,000. It was the exact number they had labeled a gift, now transmuted into a hard asset. It was no longer a symbol of their generosity. It was cash flow. It was equity. It was mine. The rest of the day was silent. I went home, made a simple dinner, and read a book. The quiet was a luxury I had never known. There were no expectations, no critiques, no passive-aggressive sighs. The silence was broken at 8:17 p.m., a text message from my mother, the first communication since the housewarming party. "I don't understand why you had to do this." It was the most honest thing she had ever said to me. She truly didn't understand. In her world, gifts flowed downward, from the successful to the less so. The balance sheet was meant to be unequal. She could not comprehend a world where the assets talked back. I typed my reply. My fingers were steady. "Because you taught me that value lies in assets. You taught me to read the paperwork, to understand what something is worth, and to act accordingly. I was just following your lesson." I sent the message. I knew there would be no reply. How could there be? I had used her own worldview as a weapon, and it had proven more effective than any emotional outburst ever could have been. A few minutes later, a second message. This one was from Everly. It was shorter, more direct. "I hate you." I looked at the 3 words on the screen. It was so simple, so pure. It was the howl of a princess who had been given the castle, only to find the key to the gate cost more than she was willing to pay. She had the house, the husband, the money. She had won the game she thought they were playing, but she had lost the land, and that, she now understood, was the only thing that had ever mattered. I typed my final reply to her. "You have a driveway. What more do you want?" I hit send. Then, I opened my phone's settings. I went to the contact entries for my mother, my father, Everly, and Tate. One by one, I blocked their numbers. I blocked them on every social media platform. I created a filter in my email that would send any message from their accounts directly and permanently to the trash, unread. It was not an act of anger. It was an act of administration. It was the final closing of a file, the archiving of a failed project. I turned off the notifications on my phone and set it down on the table. Screen down. My apartment was still outside. A light rain began to fall. A gentle, steady drumming on the window pane. The sound was cleansing. Everything was quiet now, as quiet as a field after a storm. The dirt washed clean, waiting for something new to grow. It was late that same afternoon. The sun was beginning its slow descent, casting long, golden shafts of light through the canopy of the birch trees. I stood at the head of the path, my path. It was no longer a simple gravel track. In the days following the wire transfer, the first phase of the enhancement project had been completed. The path was now a smooth, dark ribbon of permeable asphalt, wide enough for a stroller and a bicycle to pass comfortably. The new, solar-powered lamps, still dormant in the daylight, were sleek and unobtrusive. The sign was the same, but it felt different now, more permanent. Juniper Walk Greenway. It was a name on a map, a place. The air was filled with the sounds I had only imagined, the whirring wheels of a kid's rollerblades, the cheerful, tinkling bell of a bicycle, the distant laughter of a family heading towards the park. It was exactly as I had pictured it in the dry, technical language of my proposal. It was a community benefit. It was also the wall around my sister's castle, a beautiful, publicly funded, and utterly impassable wall. I was watching a young boy wobble on his scooter when my phone buzzed in my pocket. A final, automated email confirmation from the investment firm that managed the new ESOP. Subject: Confirmation of asset transfer. This email confirms that the account for the Gray Line West Hollow Project ESOP has been successfully funded in the amount of $168,000. I closed the email. The 4 junior employees who had done the real work on Vander's project, the ones who stayed late running financial models and correcting zoning maps, would arrive at work tomorrow to find that their retirement accounts had unexpectedly and significantly grown. They would never know where the money came from. It would just be a random act of corporate largesse, a rounding error in a multi-million-dollar deal. It was the only part of my past life at Gray Line I had wanted to preserve. I didn't need to go back to the office. My resignation had been accepted via a terse email from HR, but there were formalities, loose ends that needed to be tied off not for their sake, but for mine. I drove to the Gray Line Tower. It was after 5, and the building was emptying out, a reverse tide of suits and briefcases. I took the elevator to the 14th floor. The lights were dimmed, the cubicles empty. The only sound was the low hum of the servers. I walked into the executive boardroom. The long mahogany table was polished to a mirror finish, reflecting the twilight sky outside the panoramic windows. The smart screen was dark. This was the room where Vander had erased my name, where he had called my work procedural nonsense. It felt smaller now, just a room with a table and chairs. I took the office key from my pocket. It was a simple, brass key for a filing cabinet I no longer used. I placed it in the exact center of the vast, empty table. Then I took out my corporate ID badge. The plastic card felt flimsy, insignificant. It bore my name, my title, and a photograph of a woman who was 10 years younger and a lifetime more willing to be underestimated. I walked to the main exit, the glass doors that led to the elevator lobby. I held the card up to the black sensor on the wall. The sensor beeped, a familiar, electronic chirp. The light on the panel flashed green, and the magnetic lock on the door clicked open. I did not go through. I held the card there for a moment longer. Then, I swiped it again. This time, I held it against the sensor. The machine, programmed for security, registered the repeated, unauthorized access attempt. The light on the panel flashed from green to a solid, accusatory red. The lock remained sealed. My access, my history with this place, had been officially and irrevocably terminated. I dropped the useless plastic card into the recycling bin next to the door. I took the elevator down to the lobby, walked out into the cool evening air, and did not look back. I drove back to Juniper Walk. I parked my car and stood again at the entrance to the path. I took out my phone. I didn't open the camera app to take a picture of the sunset, or the happy families, or the beautiful new path. I angled it down towards my feet. The photo was simple, unartistic. It showed the toes of my worn leather boots, dusty from the walk, and beyond them, the beginning of the dark, clean asphalt path stretching into the dappled shade of the trees. It was a picture of the ground, the land. I opened a new text message, addressed to myself. I attached the photo. In the message body, I typed 3 words: failure, my foot. I hit send. There were no grand pronouncements, no tearful confrontations, no dramatic speeches delivered to a defeated family. There was no need. The story wasn't written in words anymore. It had been written in surveys and deeds, in trusts and LLCs, in zoning codes and easement modifications. It was a story told in the quiet, undeniable language of paperwork, sealed with the embossed, indelible mark of a notary's stamp. They had wanted a narrative, one with a clear winner and a designated failure. They had gotten one. It just wasn't the one they had intended to write. They had the beautiful White House, a perfect picture for their Christmas card. But it was a house on an island, a monument to their own assumptions. They bought the house. I kept the land. The frame closes there, on a pair of dusty boots planted firmly on a path I had been told was worthless, a path I had been given as a consolation prize, a path I had drawn myself, on a map of my own making, leading to a place I could finally call my own. The end. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, let us know by commenting where in the world you're listening from. It's amazing to see how far these stories travel. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video. And if you really want to support the channel, smash that hype button to help this story reach more listeners just like you.